The apocalypse is here. Once the university was a sanctuary of thought. Cloistered, yes, but also consecrated. Professors wrestled with ideas for their own sake, not because their funding depended on it. Students arrived seeking wisdom, not mere credentials. The spirit of inquiry was not caged in metrics or grant applications, but something broke, not all at once, but with a slow, grinding inevitability that few inside seemed willing to or able to stop. Today, university departments resemble bureaucratic triage centers more than bastions of knowledge. Physics departments, once a holy ground of curiosity and bold experimentation, are shuttered behind locked doors and auto-reply emails. Faculty overburdened and under-supported are retreating into smaller and smaller silos of specialization, rewarded not for thinking broadly or clearly, but for publishing prolifically and performing tightly. The average academic writes more papers than ever before, but each one echoes more faintly into the void. This isn't laziness, it's desperation. University budgets are being slashed by hundreds of millions of dollars annually. What began as a shift towards efficiency has become a rout. Programs are dissolved, labs close, philosophy becomes cultural studies, physics becomes data science, and entire departments vanish with a boardroom vote. The public watches with a kind of numb distance, sensing something important is dying, but unsure how to save it or whether it's already too late. In this environment, the alienation of alumni isn't surprising. It's structural. Departments don't ignore phone calls because they hate their alumni. They ignore them because they don't have the staff or sometimes the will to engage. There's no time to build bridges when the very roof is on fire. But if we stop here, if all we've done is light a candle to lament the darkness, the challenge is to find that spark of renewal buried deep in the rubble. The crisis isn't disbelief, it's indifference. We're told the public doesn't believe in science anymore, that they're backward, uneducated, tilting at windmills and muttering about flat earths and 5G towers. But this is a false narrative, one more convenient to institutions than true. The reality is sharper and more damning. The public is more educated than it has ever been, and it no longer cares what academic science has to say. This isn't rebellion, it's not even a rejection, it's boredom. Fields like astronomy and quantum physics once stirred the human imagination, cosmic questions about where we come from, what the universe is made of, what lies beyond the veil of the known. These disciplines used to matter. They tied into the grand project of being human. Today, they're carnival sideshows of academic infighting and YouTube hype cycles. Each theory wilder and more untethered than the last, stitched together with buzzwords and clickbait for grant money. They read more like metaphysics than science, minus the elegance. The problem is not that the public denies truth. It's that academic science often behaves as though truth doesn't exist. Postmodernism devoured the humanity, and its acid trip has leaked into the sciences. Where once stood a certainty, or at least the honest pursuit of it, we now have branding. Theory is aesthetic, precision without meaning. Meanwhile, people go to work, raise children, fix leaking pipes, watch the price of eggs rise. They live in a concrete world, not the abstract fantasies of an academic elite that sneers at common sense as folk science. There's a realness to the public's world that no longer exists in the halls of the academy. And so when the institution stumbles, when a department closes, or a university falters, the public does not rise in protest. It shrugs. It sighs with something close to relief because the trust was broken long ago. The tower cut its own anchor line: integrity, currency, and collapse. Once the currency of science was integrity, not reputation, not tenure, not institutional affiliation. Integrity. A claim stood or fell on whether it could survive scrutiny, whether it matched the observable world, whether it held up in debate. But somewhere along the line, the coin was debased. Peer review became partial control. Citations became currency. And the institutions that once served knowledge became machines for its containment. But integrity, like gold, cannot be faked. It must be earned. And once it's lost, it's hell to get back. The collapse of trust isn't isolated to science. It's endemic. The entire global economic system is based on trust, the belief that a dollar will still mean something tomorrow, that institutions will behave with some minimum level of responsibility, that rules will be followed. But America, politically, economically, scientifically, has betrayed that trust, not through ideology, but through indifference to truth. It isn't Trump that shattered the illusion. Trump is a symptom. The system rotted from within. People see it. Maybe they don't articulate it in journals or TED Talks, but they feel it. They feel it when their labor is undervalued, when promises break, when truth is negotiated instead of pursued. They feel it when institutions spin fairy tales and expect them to nod along like good citizens. And so they don't. They disengage. Not because they hate science or democracy or reason, but because the entities claiming those banners no longer represent them, no longer speak to them, no longer need them. But here's the core. The true currency isn't money. It's integrity. The ability to stand in the light and be what you are, to speak plainly, to live by a principle rather than by a consensus. That's what restores trust. That's what rebuilds science and society. That's the light in the dark. The problem isn't that people have turned against science. It's that science has turned away from people. In the scramble for survival, grant funding, publication merits, bureaucracy relevance, academic science twisted itself into a shape no one recognizes. The old cathedral of knowledge now looks like a shopping mall with tenure-track salesmen pushing flashy theories no one buys and few understand. Meanwhile, the general public, more educated, more connected, more skeptical than ever, has simply stopped showing up. It is not a rebellion, it's an indifference. And indifference is always more dangerous than anger. The institutions that once held the moral authority to shape thought and guide civilization have lost their bearings. The public is not anti-science, they're anti-nonsense. They instinctively recognize that truth must exist, that reality matters, and that a system built on obfuscation, spin, and prestige games is not a system they need. Truth isn't a social construct. It's a thing that remains when the constructs fall apart. Now the question isn't how we rebuild trust in science, but how do we rebuild science itself, re-anchored in reality, in integrity, in service to the world it seeks to explain. This is the light we're after. There was a time, not long ago, when a child would sit under the stars and ask, "What is that?" And someone from the scientific world might offer an answer. That time has passed. Today, the public no longer waits for answers from scientists. It finds them elsewhere or decides it can do without. This isn't anti-intellectualism. It's not anti-intellectualism. It's a reckoning, a quiet populist audit of what institutions have promised versus what they've delivered. The truth is that the institutions of science, particularly in academia, have drifted into a solipsistic orbit. They publish for each other, argue over terminology, and revel in the Baroque language of grant applications. The average citizen, meanwhile, has become highly literate, critically skeptical, and increasingly disinterested in scientific pomp, divorced from real-world consequence. If the universe has become a place of meaningless multiverses and quantum phone subbytes, while the rent is due and the planet burns, can you blame people for tuning out? It's not a rejection of knowledge, it's a rejection of irrelevance. The absurd has taken the throne once occupied by reason. And yet, there's a seed of hope in this collapse. With every fading institution, there arises a chance for renewal. Science returned to the hands of those who love it, not those who manage it. Knowledge must come from home, not ivy towers, but to workshops, farms, garages, and late-night kitchen table debates. We were never meant to survive on knowledge alone. Knowledge is a tool, a sword. It can slice truth from falsehood, or it can sever connection, compassion, and meaning. What we call science once stood as a shared human effort to understand our place in the universe. Not just to dominate it, not to mine it for grants or tenures, but to find ourselves in the starlight, in the structure of atoms, in the arc of a falling apple. But the core has hollowed. Science, divorced from meaning, collapses into sterile ethics without virtue. It becomes a bureaucratic machine of citation chasing and reputation hoarding. And as it distances itself from religion, not dogma, but true religion, the lived experience of humanity, reverence, and conscience, it loses the integrity that made it great. The telescope once pointed towards the heavens, not merely for data, but for awe. This isn't a call to return to superstition. It's a call to reunite the two hemispheres of the human mind, the rational and the soulful. Religion, true religion, asks, what is good? Science asks, what is true? But neither question can live long without the other. Without virtue, truth is cold. Without truth, virtue is blind. And so society drifts. It clings to emotional epistemologies. Beliefs become feeling. Truth becomes preference. Those who profit from confusion stoke the fires of this chaos until knowledge is suspect and ignorance becomes a badge of honor. And in that fog, something precious is lost. Not just clarity, but identity. What kind of civilization chooses ignorance as its lighthouse? What kind of species trades its birthright of reason for a dopamine hit and an algorithmic feed? We need not stay lost. People cower at the thought of collapse, as though it lies in the future, a distant storm cloud still forming. But collapse isn't coming. It's here. It surrounds us like fog, soft, silent, yet deadly. Institutions once revered are now hollow husks. Systems built to sustain us now devour our trust like termites in a rotting beam. We scroll. We post. We like. We rehearse normality in public while quietly rationing hope in private. It is not fear of collapse that haunts us, it's the recognition that it has already happened and that we have no map, no lifeboat, no script for what comes next. The Titanic has cracked in half and we're still straightening the deck chairs, refreshing the news. This is not the apocalypse of fire and brimstone. This is entropy, slow, civilized, unraveling. A polite implosion. Civilization exhausted by its own excess, folds in on itself, and the greatest tragedy is not that we are going down. It's that we're afraid to look each other in the eye and say so. But pretending won't stop it. The fantasy of return to order, to stability, to sense, it's just that, a fantasy. Progress has become a ghost. Justice has been outsourced to PR firms. Peace is a slogan slapped on missiles. And in this rubble, what do we cling to? Notifications, novelties, narcotics of the mind. We have built a world of exquisite distraction, so exquisite that we scarcely notice the silence beneath it all, the silence of real conversation, the absence of meaning, the void where shared truth used to live. But even in the dark, something stirs. Not hope yet, but the possibility of it, a flicker in the wreckage. Knowledge is not static. It breathes, it expands, it evolves, and is as alive as we are, and as dependent on us as we are on it. We are not merely observers in a dispassionate cosmos. We are participants in a grand unfolding. Every breath we take, every idea we forge, every truth we uncover is part of a sacred exchange between ourselves and the universe that birthed us. We arrive here helpless and unknowing, crying, naked, and unable to articulate the depth of the mystery into which we are born. The universe does not remain mute. It speaks through sensation, struggle, ecstasy, and despair. It teaches us through the fall and the rise, the loss and the breakthrough. We eat, we breathe, we dream, we mourn, we make love, we wage war, we seek meaning in the stars and in each other. And in this wild, aching experience of being alive, knowledge grows. And in return, what do we give the universe? We give it stories, etched into cave walls and circuit boards. We give it medicine wheels aligned with solstices, pyramids that whisper geometry to the heavens, footprints pressed into the lunar dust, algorithms that swirl in the servers of modern temples. We give it Bach and the Bhagavad Gita. We give it children's drawings and quasar catalogs. We give it questions often more beautiful than our answers. The universe has no need for our survival, but it has a need for our knowing. The cosmos, in its cold silence, longed to marvel, and so it shaped matter into neurons and love songs and chalkboards and spirals of DNA. It made a creature that could say, "I see." But let us not delude ourselves. This is not a birthright. It is a covenant. If we turn our backs on wonder, on truth, on integrity, then we sever the relationship that sustains us. If we consume knowledge without gratitude, if we hoard it without humility, we cease to pursue it with reverence and courage, then we cease to be useful to the universe, and it will move on without us. We are the scribes of existence. The cosmos has handed us the quill. What we write with it determines whether we remain in the story.